Welcome to EIG's 22nd webinar. This is the second of a series of webinars on rapid skills deployment. We're focusing today on closing this widening skills gap. The productivity challenge is, how do we do more with less? Sustaining productivity gains are dependent on the employees who in the organizations are, of course, our greatest asset. Over the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a significant investment to enable the workforce to perform at a higher level in job roles that have yet to be defined. The employee will continue to be the critical link to differentiate your company from the competition. Therefore, employee skills will be at the apex of productivity and profitability. So as you enter into the webinar, please have your cell phone ready or open up another screen and join pollev.com that was sent in the email, pollev/Greg Schlegel 910. Again, thank you for joining, and we appreciate that you're taking the time to be with us on this today, especially in light of the COVID crisis, as well as the ice storm brewing through the Midwest and down in Texas. We hope that you and your family are safe and healthy. My name is Jim Vries, founder and president of Enhanced International Group. EIG is a platform of over 40 consulting companies, and SaaS providers dedicating empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partner tenured experience. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining positive margin growth. The competitive advantage focusing on 90-day action plans, and we'll show you one of those at the end of this webinar. We thrive on delivering 1 + 1 + 1 = infinity. We hope that you find this information useful for you and your teams, and we welcome your questions and comments to support these efforts. Please have your cell phone handy again and log into pollev.com. Since March of 2020, we've been having webinars focusing along our major categories of people, process, and technology. In people, we've discussed rapid skills deployment in an earlier webinar and leveraging agility for resiliency in cybersecurity. And the process side, we've focused on the resilient enterprise and strategy execution, new product introduction and development, and launching resilient products. We've also focused on supply chain risk and resiliency and the COVID-19, and we've shown the W recovery that we use. And from a technology perspective, we've had some webinars on visible, resilient enterprise digital ecosystem and enabling artificial intelligence in your environment. And we also next week have a webinar on digital twins, data-driven digital twins, and how that can help accelerate smart industry 4.0. So that'll be our next webinar on March the 2nd, and on March 9th, we'll have the new product introduction, development, speed to resiliency webinar series resume. And that will be followed by the supply chain risk and resiliency webinars and back into the AI webinars. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Greg McLaughlin, highly respected leader. And Greg, can you share your background, please?
Sure. Welcome. My background is I have a doctorate degree in business administration and a master's in statistics and an undergraduate degree in meteorology. I've worked in the past many years, probably at least 30 years, in 50 of the Fortune 500 companies. I worked mostly in the area of quality, engineering, and research, but I've also worked and observed and had interest in the area of the changing dynamics in the workforce itself. Presently, I'm also helping over 60 PhD students to get their dissertations and degrees, working in this field, the HR and the field of work dynamics with these PhD students. I have written 6 books in innovation. Therefore, I do like new ideas and I like to stay fresh. And just for the heck of it, I have 30 published songs. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. Quite a impressive background. So with that, we'll get started. And again, just a reminder for everyone to log into polev.com, Greg Schlegel 910. And with that, Greg will kick us off with the agenda.
We're going to begin the agenda by talking about the job to be done and the evolution of that. That is the work that goes on in organizations. The next thing we're going to be talking about is another element of and aligned with skills is the employee themselves. They're a critical aspect of this. And we're talking about the employee job ownership and why that's important for the employee to own the job in order to provide and execute the job in such a way that they are most efficient and effective. We're going to talk about the process of converting a job to the employee skills. Give us a real quick example of that. We're going to be talking about, because the employee is so important, why the committed employee, that is the employee that is fully committed to the job, the loyal employee, is going to be a key to success in the future. And finally, we'll talk about some key elements of our rapid skills deployment and assessment process. As we mentioned before, the purpose of this webinar is to talk about how to close the widening skills gap. The difficulty that exists today is that many times jobs have been created prior to the fact that skills were considered critical or important. And jobs themselves are very different, and they look very differently, act differently than, so to speak, jobs that have been developed and identified with skills. So we're talking about today's typical employee as being one that understands the job as to what they've learned, their experience from the job. But the fact is that they tend to be oftentimes disengaged with the job because of the fact that there is not this employee ownership. They're not fully capable. They're not aligning with the best practices they could be. They're not committed as they should be. So our first thing is to talk about the fact that in order for them to accomplish the job, they need to be competent, but they also need to be invested in the career aspects of the job and their own career as well. Now, to better understand this, I think it's important to understand that from time infinite, in the beginning, jobs were essentially simpler. They were seasonally based, they were focused on a particular activity, and they were adaptive to whatever need it was. Everyone farmed. But the difficulty with that is that over the years, those simpler jobs have now been changing and evolving, and they've evolved to the next level of job, which we call office work, which again is, in this case, more complex. It now is duty-based. It has a certain amount of requirements and responsibilities. But in reality, that's also changing again today with the digitization and IT that's required. So jobs are becoming more diversified, more decentralized. People are working from home, and they're very strongly knowledge-based. Now, this pandemic has obviously changed many things, and we all know that we've had to deal with this pandemic itself. And post-pandemic, one of the things that we see is that there is, again, this element of complexity. In the future, it's going to be the complex jobs that people are looking for help in. That's where they want people. They need people. And to be honest, they're having difficulty finding people that have the skills that they need. Not only that, but you're talking about the majority of the jobs are going to be in the healthcare field, safety, health and safety, and the technology area, particularly in the digitization areas and agile ways of working. That's where jobs are going to be. And those jobs are going to require skills. And those skills are going to be something that is not akin necessarily to experience. So again, what's changing, and you can see on the graph on the right-hand side, it says that the roles that are increasing the most in terms of hiring are those roles that are health-related, technology-related. These are the more complex jobs. The more complex the job, the more important it is to understand that job. Now, work done by McKinsey proves that. They've done studies that have shown that there isn't a good understanding of how these automation and digitization jobs will affect skills needs. That employees don't know enough about the job to be able to execute these in such a way to achieve the objectives, to become efficient and effective. It also suggests that current HR isn't necessarily addressing or beginning to address this issue as quickly as it needs to be because of this rush of jobs that are coming. So there's a lot of barriers to reskilling. Reskilling now would be getting people to learn new skills. Not only that, but you combine that with the fact that people don't necessarily see that there is this gap, or they're skeptical about it, or they're not expecting it, makes this even more complex, makes this even more engaging of a need at this point.
So this next section is on gaining employee job ownership and skills development. I think we can all agree we want to establish a seamless recruitment and onboarding process that closes this knowledge gap between the employee's perceived understanding of the job to the actual understanding of their job. If we close the knowledge gap, the onboarding process to enabling the employee to be productive is greatly enhanced. So as we look at job descriptions, the employee perception is often at odds with the actual job role. It may be disconnected with reality, task-oriented and descriptive versus evaluated. Written by those who aren't really knowledgeable of the job itself. It may be written by a manager or that did the job many years ago, or HR who was told what the job is from somebody who used to do the job, or a subject matter expert. So there's inaccuracies and a lack of directions, and it can be often outdated. And so what's missing? What is the expected outcome? Why is it important? How is it best accomplished? Is what is often missing from these job descriptions. So Greg will next discuss transforming job descriptions into job-related skills.
It's important to remember that there's a huge amount of turnover that's going on. And that turnover, even though we're in this post-pandemic era, if I can say, that turnover is, again, just adding to the difficulty in trying to maintain and keep these employees who have gained these skills. One of the things that we have to deal with is that oftentimes when we look at a job in terms of how it's described, the job itself is described in terms of its tasks and activities. That's important. What we're saying is not enough. And not enough such that it doesn't describe what's expected, the outcomes that that person must meet. It doesn't describe the job's more complex requirements. It doesn't necessarily describe the job itself. It doesn't describe the skill that's required. And so what happens is you have people that are pure to fit the criteria, but necessarily either are not desirous of the job or find that the job may not be something that they want. And so there's this disengagement that's going on, especially with the younger generations. And the difficulty with that is that that disengagement, the lack of information that's there, particularly for outcomes, would be something that if we added metrics to it, it would help us to better evaluate our performance. So one thing that we're talking about that's needed in order to convert from what we have today in duties and responsibilities is to include the outcomes and then to rephrase what we need in terms of the skills.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So I think next we'll start with our first survey question. How do you develop employee work competency? Do you look at it from a special task force perspective? Does HR or your talent management group develop that? Or is it owned by the employee themselves who do the work to be done now at this time? Or is it a manager doing it? Or is it a corporate directive of you have a corporate directive in how these work competencies are created? And then or do you have something that's different? So we ask you again to enter into poll everywhere .com, and we have some responses. It's interesting that it looks like we have some folks that are doing what we would like to see: employee co-development, and the other is having HR do it. So still a little bit of work to do in that regard. Greg, do you have any other comments on this? What you see?
Well, I think that normally people would rely on human resources, but so many organizations are outsourcing that's going to be more difficult to do.
Yeah. HR has, the job of an HR person has dramatically changed over the last 20 years, to the lament of HR folks for the most part. They're not happy about it. So, and that then leaves a gap here. And that may be one of the root causes that's underlying this, the poor job descriptions. Now the managers are doing this without the support of people from HR. So we certainly would want that support. But the actual work to be done, the employee who's doing it is the one who knows it the best. Anything else, Greg?
No, I was just going to say that even I get calls all the time for people looking for work with my experience and background, and I keep telling them that it'd be difficult to hire someone my age. So they said, "Oh, who cares? We just need someone at this point in time." So the need out there is tremendous.
Yeah, the need is maybe there's a gap there. Good comment. Maybe good for us. All right. So the third section is converting the job to employee skills. And in here, we'll address defining the roles, workflow, process, as you see in the upper left. And this focus will be on mastering this job skills gap of moving from the job to the skill set as we just described in the last few minutes. So to kick us off here, this slide is a build slide that talks about our rapid skills deployment perspectives on two different perspectives. One is the employee's career, and the other is the company's vision and mission. And so we want to have these two to meet. And we meet through the personal identity, so of the person and of the company. So what is that identity that we're linking to? So to build your personal career roadmap, we embark on many job roles, right? And the job description describes these job roles and roles and responsibilities. So that's the employee perspective of the job roles and how it fits. Whereas the company is looking at it as, we got to get this work done. What is the work to be done? And we got to get that done in our team environment. And we do that through work activities and work deliverables. So two perspectives on both trying to accomplish something. And of course, we're trying to get to those outcomes, the outcomes of the company to get the work to be done. And of course, the job roles themselves, if you look at from the employee, is the employee feeling satisfied that they've accomplished their outcome. But when you look at these two perspectives, there's somewhat of a missing part of this. And then who owns these outcomes? The company says we own the outcomes, and the employee says, man, we own these outcomes. So that ownership is the gap. So if there's not alignment there between what the employee's thinking and what the company's thinking that outcome is in the value of that, that's where you have this ownership gap. So the employee wants to own what they deliver, and the company wants to own what they deliver. But the skills are what the employee gains from taking that job for the company. But the skills, the employee says, hey, I own those skills. And the company says, no, I own the skills that you wouldn't be able to do that without me. And there's the dilemma, especially with the large turnover now between employees in companies, or employees are jumping companies every 2 to 5 years. Whereas in 50 years ago or 30 years ago, employees stayed with the company. So the skills stayed within the company and you had that transference going on. Now we're losing that. So when that person leaves the company, those skills go out the door. So the work required to do the work should be aligned to each of the job roles. It should not be aligned to the employee's current skill set. So in other words, it should be aligned to the job role, minimizing job role expansion. So this is a big problem because you go, Frank has these skills. Maybe Frank should just go ahead and do this other job, even though that's not part of the job role. Well, when you start doing that time and time again, and then Frank leaves, then it leaves a bigger gap than the job role as it was originally defined. And that's one of the biggest problems we see now, and that's just expanding. So again, it's all about translating the why, the what, how into value for the organization to stabilize so that the organization can optimize. So if we don't have stability in the job roles, you'll never be able to optimize to that higher level and be competitive in the marketplace. Greg?
One of the things that we look about, as we mentioned before about this knowledge gap, is the job itself. Not just the description of the job, but the job itself. And essentially what we do is we look at the job as being such that it's more than just a set of instructions. Look, if you click that, okay, click again. All right. And yet many times that's what the jobs have been reduced to, or essentially assigned to. And the difficulty with that is the instructions may be helpful in one respect, in terms of what you're looking the person to do, but a job isn't just a set of instructions. It's more than that. And when we start looking at the job in depth, we do a job analysis leading to a job profile, which leads into a database of our jobs. That is, we look at the jobs in a bit different way. Next slide. And when we do look at the jobs, we don't just look, in fact, at the tasks and activities, which are important, but we look at requirements. What's required at each step in the process? All right, and do the requirements support the tasks and activities that we're doing? And are the tasks and activities such that they tell the operator, in this case, even a simple job like loading paper, Does it tell the operator essentially what to do? In every job, there are decisions. And you rarely see that associated with a job. But there are decisions that have to be made. And if those decisions are not easily accessible and easily identifiable, oftentimes the decision will be made incorrectly and there'll be an uninformed decision. And again, when you combine that with the outcomes, along with the idea of why, we talked about why, what, how, you need to know why the job is important. Why does this job fit in? One thing that I learned many times going out on the floor was I'd ask them, why are you doing this job? And more often than not, I was told, I don't know. This is my job. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm just doing my job. If you don't understand why you're doing the job, why would you give it your full potential? Now, the point is that the workforce criteria leads to the skills. What's missing here is the skills that I need to do this job. Also, what's missing here is the impact that this has. Does it pass the workforce criteria? Yes, it does. When you get into this detail, now you may say, well, that's a lot of detail. Yes, and it can take a few hours to do, but inevitably, when you have the detail for your critical jobs, you also provide the opportunity to improve that job because you've got that job well established, well identified. And the employee that owns that job can then make that job better. Next slide.
That was an excellent example, Greg. Thanks for sharing that. Our fourth topic is enabling the committed employee and gaining employee commitment. This section focuses on reducing the non-productive gap by transforming a typical employee into a committed employee. So we're going to start with the stress and uncertainty issues that affect work effectiveness. Stress can originate from many different sources. It can originate from poor preparation, lack of training, or basic knowledge understanding. Many of us have had nightmares about not being prepared for an exam in school, or maybe even doing the work that we have to do, being prepared for the work to be done at our current job. Then there's uncertainty, lack of experience. Can originate from the lack of any experience in any area and coming up to speed with your coworkers. Really, can you keep up with everyone else? How are you versus your co-employees, your coworkers? And then there's anxiety. And anxiety can arise from insufficient learning, training on the job, falling behind, again, from your coworkers. So these are all challenges that can be resolved by focusing on enabling the employees with the skills to be able to effectively focus on the work to be done. From the leadership team down to your frontline managers, our focus should be on reducing employees' stress and anxiety. And these stress and anxiety incubators that rob the employee from achieving success. In other words, remove all roadblocks or excuses on why the work to be done cannot be delivered in the most effective manner. The next slide here, we're focusing on the employee self-identity. Gaining a clear understanding of self-identity is a lifelong journey, as we all know, as Yoda would tell us. There are many books on the subject and more books and blogs every day, from Dale Carnegie to Stephen Covey, to new biographies, which are coming out, it seems like weekly now. And then self-identity has been the focus of not only to intensify in the upcoming years, it's just only going to grow. To gain a clearer understanding of self-identity, a common practice is to discover the balance between behaviors, opinions, beliefs, and judgments, and then balance this with how we feel with our emotions, motivation, empathy, and social skills, how we react in different situations, and how we appear to tick by others. There are often two different personas that folks can only understand about each other after multiple conversations. I like the 3 times rule, meaning it takes about 3 interactions to assess a person from where they're coming from. Although we all know that we perceive people in 30 seconds to 2 minutes of meeting a person, our first impressions, and we use that as a baseline, but we need to keep open-minded. We're all very perceptive. However, we should never judge a book by its cover, right? We should always give each other the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't always align with our thoughts. If something someone says, we should be asking for clarity instead of acting on what we think they said. So, in summary, the worker influence is dependent on the behaviors and emotion intelligence. Behaviors, actions, and conduct are based on our beliefs and judgments, and we act upon those beliefs and judgments in our environment, whether we are creative, demanding, or intolerant. Emotion intelligence is all about the control of your emotions. There are 5 components that are often talked about: self-awareness. And self-awareness is, do you know how you come across to others? Self-regulation, are you able to manage our emotions at the right time and right place? Internal motivation, are we motivated by what we are doing? Why are we here? Does it even make sense? Is there justifiable internal reward in accomplishing the work to be done? And then there's empathy. Can we be empathetic and compassionate towards our fellow employees? Are we enabling others? And then the last one, our social skills, the toughest one of all. Do we show respect and demonstrate integrity to others? Do we simply smile? Or do we actually look the person in the eye and smile with sincerity and commitment? And starting a conversation with a smile often draws positive reactions in any social situation, for meetings, conversations, and of course on Zoom. There are many reasons the employee is motivated to perform during the work to the best of their ability. Being comfortable under one's skin is one of the first steps to realizing this self-identity. Myers-Briggs is an excellent tool to get started, to keep you in check. There's now software as a service tools out there, Predictive Index, which focuses on talent optimization. And it provides online tools to do your assessment, which would usually take you on Myers-Briggs 20 to 30 minutes and another hour and a half to figure out what it means. With the predictive index, you can take the assessment in 4 or 5 minutes and understand who you are in about 20 minutes, greatly reducing the process. And as I mentioned, predictive index is a partner for EIG. So now we're on to our 5th and last module on the rapid skills deployment, development, assessment, and 90-day action plan. And here we're talking about rapid skills capabilities, building from apprenticeships, proficiencies, our 30, 60, 90-day plan, and strategy. Again, here we're moving from an area of skills recognition to how do you embed those skills into your organization. So we're going to kick it off right now here with what is rapid skills deployment? Well, it's a framework that we've built that includes conversion of learning and employees' achievement system that assists in reskilling or upskilling critical jobs or work assignments by rapidly equipping employees to become proficient in one or more skill sets. So we've broken it down into 3 interlocking processes. The first is a conversion of the job roles descriptions to a skills format through a diagnostic tool that we built. And then the second is skills training learning through a rapid skills learning process. And then third is the performance and achievement competency through apprenticeships. Greg will next provide a more detailed explanation on the process of converting the job into a skill.
In terms of converting a job into a skill, We have a few first steps that are preparatory in nature, and obviously you have to select the job, the critical job in this case. Second of all, you have to make sure you identify, or you may need to modify the expected outcomes or objectives or goals, whatever you want to call those. Third, you want to identify the work processes associated with this, and are they viable and actionable? We have a job analysis template that we use, which is called a radio template, and that involves aspects of the job itself. Next, we apply experiential learning to this. We're not talking about traditional learning, we're talking about hands-on learning for this. We evaluate and validate, finally, and the last part of this, which would be the finishing part, would be we modify based on competency and proficiency. Now, this works as well for an exempt job as a non-exempt job. It doesn't really make any difference what the job is, even though we know that you probably see this more in a non-exempt situation or exempt situation. But in this case, you're going to say that there really is a process, no matter what the job is, in terms of how you can identify the key components of that job itself. If you're talking about how long this takes, realizing that if you take this process with a particular job, you could easily do this in first 4 steps in 8 hours. The next step takes about 10 hours. Step 5 is the experiential learning aspect of it. Final step takes 2 to 3 hours, 6 and 7. So you're not talking about a long process. And the final, that is the wrap up of the conversion process. All this could be done in 40 hours. Now, again, that's the first time you do this. As you become more proficient in how you do this, you can reduce the number of steps, and you can certainly reduce the amount of time it takes. So that our prediction is in a matter of 8 hours, eventually, you can get a person to be 80% competent in the job. Again, this is the beginning, but in the long run, it only takes 8 hours to reach this. Now, we talked about competencies because when you talk about skills, it isn't just achievement and performance, it's competency. And we have competency levels that the employee can reach. The first competency level is a novice competency level, and there's 2 parts to that. One is the beginner, that someone's coming in to the process that really has no competence, may not even have knowledge on the job, or may have some knowledge of the job. And then the novice can also exist after they've reached that 80% rate. Level 2 is an intermediate rate. These are people who essentially would were considered to be local experts. There's an advanced level rate, which is more of a division or corporate rate. And finally, there's a mastery level of competency very few people would achieve, which would become sort of the sensei, the guru in this particular case, in terms of what you do. Now, not everyone's going to reach that. Very few reach 3 and 4. Most will stay on level 1 and 2, and most people go to level 2 in terms of that. Level 2, this person's going to be at least 95% competent at what they do. And the idea about competence really has to do with whether they're conscious or unconscious of it. And there's a level that you can look at. And essentially, when somebody is competent, all right, they have the intuition that they need to be as efficient and effective as they can in order to make changes, in order to correct whatever deficiencies there are, that the job becomes intuitive rather than prescriptive. That's where we want to move. We'd like to move people to that stage. And of course, competencies measure standard of performance. Let's see.
Next, we want to match the employee to the job. So this is a lifelong journey approach, is matching the employee to the job. So we'll first review the 4 perspectives that come together to develop this ideal fit for each employee to realize their self-identity. Starting with the current work environment, which is characterized by the organization's culture, industry, management practices, and tactics. Is your environment full of technology, or are you still using the same technology that you were using 20 years ago? So what does that culture feel like and act like? Then next we have the work to be done. And what does the workplace look like? What are the activities and tasks, roles and responsibilities, objectives, deliverables, and skills required to make up the job profile to get the work to be done? Then next is the job description. So we need to link all these things to the job description and how we've recognized through the job title, compensation, and benefits. So the big question is it really worth it for the employee to be doing that job, and what's the value of that job through the job description? Then from the other perspective, the other direction is looking at it from a talent optimization and your behaviors, self-awareness of the responsibility, integrity, interpersonal skills, teamwork. Again, this is where predictive index adds a lot of value. And then career development. What are your aspirations, your educational experience, your expertise, your EQ, your IQ, your emotional intelligence, your awareness, your personal awareness. So all these things are coming together to make up the job description, which is then your manager is looking at it from the perspective of how to evaluate you and evaluate that job description. And then that's then brought in the hiring manager and HR. So building this infrastructure that hires the right type of person to fit your environment takes some effort. Building the infrastructure supports employees to learn the skills that are needed and can be leveraged. These skills will make the overall organization more productive and effective. With increased employee understanding, that's why there is the why are we here, and the value that we bring becomes more self-evident. This supports the premise that an employee who understands their value becomes productive and a loyal employee. So the loyalty of the employee is a function of how they see themselves in all of these four different perspectives. So again, trust can only be achieved when the work matches the employee's capability. If there's a mismatch there, again, a gap, as we've discussed earlier, we're going to have distrust and a mismatch, and that's going to result in lower productivity. So next we'll get into the work, the rapid skills deployment workforce model. And the first pillar that we have here is the assessment. That'll be the first stage of our model. So this is when we come in, we look at your plans, we assign responsibilities and so forth. And then in the second pillar here, after the assessment and the piloting stage, we'll look into the job descriptions, expected outcomes, job competencies, and do a demo project. Then in the third pillar here, when we implement, we will link our processes, coordinate it with your current processes, coordinate your resources, and refine the skills to meet the job to be done. Then the next, we'll integrate. We'll integrate it into your HR systems, your digital information hub, your competency management. Will provide simulations and eliminate those non-value added type tasks. And then when you get to the optimized stage, that's when you can get to the quick turnaround, move from onboarding of 90 days for an employee down to 30 days, down to 15 days, to get them to that 95% competency in the shortest period of time, which is our overall goal of the RSD model. So again, from the assessment perspective, we feel we can do that within the first 30 days. We can start piloting and implementing in the next 60 days, and then up to 90 days to complete the entire process. Greg, any closing comments on that slide before we move on to the close?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay.
All right. Basically, in terms of takeaways here, a statistic that we haven't written up here, but we do have down, 83% of organizations are having trouble finding talent. Now, you could say that the reason they're having trouble finding talent is because the talent doesn't exist. But have you thought about this in terms of the talent existing, but not being attracted to your organization? It could be that they're not seeing what they want to do and how the employee can benefit themselves and move in their career with your organization. So a lot of this has to do with even the very beginning of the job through the job description phase. And that's why it's so important, because it talks about the intricacies of the job and how the job is going to be done efficiently and effectively. But if that job knowledge isn't something that's going to be attractive to someone, to say, this is what I want to help build my career, then even if they exist, they may be difficult to attract to your organization. There are challenges in gaining employee commitment and ownership. 67% of employees are stressed with anxiety, unsure of their value. If you're dealing with a lot of millennials, and you should be at this point in time, millennials are different than baby boomers or Gen X. In their world, they're looking for the opportunity to, where do they go next? What can I do next? How can I better myself next? They may want to better themselves in your organization, and they can, or they may see an opportunity outside, but they're looking at it very differently. All right, in terms of this, in terms of how they see the process. Now, I will say that another reason why I'm interested in this, and I think Jim is the same way, is because we have done the same thing ourselves. Even though we grew up in a generation that didn't necessarily say that was the way to go, we also saw that as a necessity. That is, in terms of getting what we wanted to get, getting the skills we need and the experiences, we also saw it in that respect. So basically what we're saying is the fact that the job description and the job itself, most importantly, the job itself, are out of alignment. Finally, we can't achieve the goals to rapidly skill or reskill, upskill the workforce without first addressing these gaps. And these are just the key gaps, but there are other gaps, as we mentioned, along the way too, that need to be addressed. Without addressing these gaps, it's going to be a difficult time to attract the workforce that you need. Now, you can train these people, but again, if you train them in a traditional sense, or if you're expecting the training in a traditional sense is going to work, training is inevitably has a effectiveness that's in the 5 to 10%. That is, a person, when they're trained, retains 5 to 10% of what they learned. That may not be enough for you in order to make them competent enough to do the job. So you may have to do this in-house, and you may need to reskill or upskill them, all right, as well. So remember, with that, it may be critical that you may need to use your own people to attain the skills you're looking for. Jim?
Yeah, so I think we have some questions coming in. I think there's a question here about they see the upskilling and reskilling as a problem. They're seeing gaps in finding people, and they're asking if any recommendations as to agencies or groups that can help with that upskill and reskilling out there that are known to do that.
Well, I think that again, you need to be very careful if someone is looking to get a certificate in terms of something that they're doing, if they're going back to school for a certificate type program. That can be very useful in terms of providing skills. But if you're looking for degree programs, no one goes into a degree program with the attitude and with the knowledge that they're going to walk out with a set of skills. They're not. One of the problems that education has is it's not achieving a set of skills that employers need. So again, you have to be careful how they're getting these skills And oftentimes, many people feel that they can best do it themselves with help with outsiders.
So that's a real challenge for the employee who's looking for a career change, finding out that they're not doing the job that they really want to do. They go to school, at night school, in their current job, and then they find out that what they receive from that training doesn't help them in the new job. So how do we address that?
How do we address that? Well,
Yeah,
I, I
that
think
to
we
me
need
is
to, we're doing what we have done, and we're working with universities in order to develop programs that essentially provide that certification. The program I teach in innovation provides a certification when they're done, not just grades and traditional types of learning that they're doing, but also provides a certification. And not only that, but the students have to basically do a project where they innovate, and I make them take that project as far as they can. And we've had a number of students that have actually created projects that they've patented. So again, you want to, not everyone has, but many have taken the projects and done something with them. So again, they're learning skills that they can use and apply.
very good. Great answers, Greg. With that, I think we're going to close unless, Greg, you have any other comments?
No, I don't.
Okay. So just a kind reminder to everyone, March 2nd, we'll be having our next webinar on leveraging digital twins to accelerate collaboration execution. We'll be having some more of these webinars on this topic. The dates to be determined, but you can see we have a fairly full calendar coming up. On March 9th, we have new product introduction, speed to resiliency, and focusing on rational risk taking. That's part of that series. And then after that, the following week, we have two webinars, one on artificial intelligence and one on the supply chain risk and resiliency. All these are listed in these all can be found available, and we'll be sending out notices on these webinars coming up. So we have a lot going on. We look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Again, we focus on people, process, technology. There are a set of about 40 plus companies, consultants, all looking to make the world a bit of a better place as far as how do we make the best of every day. And with that, we're going to close. Thank you so much.